Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is Take 5 with Steven Travers. Our guest, Steven Travers, is with us today. Our producer is Logan Landers, who will also join us. I'm Harper LaBelle. Thank you for tuning in. And, Steven, we had the AFC and the NFC Championship this past weekend for obvious reasons, because you're now in the Bills Mafia. You spent a week up there earlier in the season. I think there's a little bit of disappointment, but let's start with the NFC game between the Eastern Division, really, of the NFC, when you have Washington taking on Philadelphia. Um, I thought it would be an epic battle. I was thinking this is going to be an uphill climb for the Commanders taking on Philadelphia the way that they did. They're playing with house money. You throw any cliche that you want, but I did not expect them to get trumped there and lose by 32 points. Give me your first perspective about the game itself. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind's eye? I know we talked about this off air just a little bit. Very impressed you were, as is everybody else, with how good Philadelphia is in all three phases: offense, defense, special teams. They played well. They dominated when they need to, and they end up going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Washington reminded me, they're a pro team, but they reminded me a little bit of Tennessee as they went into that Ohio State game. A team with momentum. Their fans really were with them. They were on the road, but they looked like they had momentum, and they did. And Jaden Daniels played well. He's a really good player. He's got a great future, former Heisman winner. But I listened to some sports talk radio people who really were down on Jalen Hurts. And I am a Jalen Hurts fan. I've said it before, and I have been since I saw him play in Texas. It's got 8 years ago. He's a veteran, and he's a really good quarterback, and he's won a Super Bowl, and now he's back in it. He really came through and played a great game. Now, of course, the lodestar of Philadelphia is Saquon Barkley. Former Penn State star, former New York Giant. Somehow, I don't want to say anyone gave up on him, but someone may have done what owner named DeWitt of the Cincinnati Reds once did in 1965 when he traded Frank Robinson from Cincinnati to the Baltimore Orioles, saying he's an old 30. And if anyone thought that Barkley, who's probably close to 30 years old now, is an old 30, well, that's been proven incorrect. Just as Frank Robinson responded by winning a triple crown in 1966 with the Orioles. So sometimes, you can really fire up a player, especially a player with pride and ability like Barkley. And this is what happened. He's having a season like what LaDainian Tomlinson used to have, what O.J. Simpson used to do, the great running back for the Rams. Help me, Logan. Eric Dickerson. He's at that level, which is saying an awful lot. We're talking about a Hall of Fame level. But I think Hurts has got a shot at getting to Canton, especially if he can pull out a victory. And his team might just be the most complete team in terms of offense, defense, passing, and running heading into this. There's been some thinking that the NFC is not as good a league. I've always been leaning towards the AFC. I just think outside of the years where the 49ers were strong, ever since the merger of the old AFL, AFC, I think it's been the better league for whatever reason, but I think the tables are turning a little bit. This is going to be a chance for an Eagles team to go up against a lot of history. So we'll talk a little bit about Kansas City in a second, but they're up against it, but they have the tools. They're just like Ohio State, okay? Remember I said Ohio State is made for a playoff? Well, so is Philadelphia. They're all made for playoffs. They have to be in this era. But I think Philadelphia has demonstrated, I don't think they've had too many injuries, and they've got a lot of depth, and they've got all their weapons.
You bring up an interesting point, Stephen. I call it the Hall of Fame, but it's really become the Hall of Champions. You have to win a Super Bowl or two. And in some cases, if you're Jim Plunkett and you win 2 Super Bowls, you still don't get in. So there are some if, ands, or buts that would take place. Does that, I won't say solidify, but does that at least open up the option for a very early candidacy for Jalen Hurts if he does have at least one Super Bowl win for him to potentially get there?
In my opinion, it does. I'm a Hurts fan. I believe it puts him at that level. I'm not saying a first-round guy. Now, I'll give you another example of exactly what you're talking about, Harper, and a guy who's been in the news. That's Pete Carroll, former USC coach, who recently signed with the Las Vegas Raiders, and possibly Tom Brady is going to spend more time in his position as part owner of the Raiders to work with Carroll and develop that team. Pete Carroll would be a lock on the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but for one play when his running back there was a play, remember that play in his second Super Bowl? He won a Super Bowl and he was right on the line, I think in the 2012 or 2013 Super Bowl, and he made a strange call and it didn't work out, and they were unable to score even though they were a foot or a few inches away. And that game so far, I think, is the reason Pete Carroll would not at this time be in the Hall of Fame, and big reason I think why he signed with the Raiders, because he wants to be in the Hall of Fame. Believe me, I know this man. He's got a big ego. So, yes, you win 2. I'm a Plunkett fan, too. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. Look at his college and pro record is fantastic, and he's just such a story. But that's not what we're talking about today. If Hurts can go all the way, then I think he's a Hall of Famer, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon. And it was Marshawn Lynch they didn't go to him. They went with a little quick slant, and it was intercepted in the end zone. And all the Patriots needed to do was take a knee from the 1-yard line and run the clock out. They end up winning that Super Bowl, come from behind. Logan, same question to you regarding Jalen Hurts. And I ask this kind of with a little asterisk because it's way too early to make that decision. And I would also throw in, does the Super Bowl have anything to do with it? And how much of that and the stats that he would have? Because if he's not leading, if he's not Brett Favre or Dan Marino in terms of numbers, and he's not, he's not on the same trajectory to throw for 75,000 yards like Brady. He may not play 20 years like Tom did, but will he qualify, or at least will he be invited to the conversation with the Super Bowl win?
I think that he'll be invited in that conversation. I won't say it's going to be an immediate lock. I'm not going to say that if he wins this one that he's going to be a first ballot at this time. Like he's been in the league since 2020, I believe. So, and he's put up some really good numbers, right? But I feel like he still needs to grow numbers-wise to really, to solidify himself as a Hall of Famer. I think he's a very good player. And obviously, I think a Super Bowl will definitely help you out. There's a ton of great players who never won Super Bowls that are made it into the Hall of Fame, and there's some who won a lot more than others, and you might have thought they were a little bit better locks to get in. But I wouldn't immediately put the stamp of a Hall of Fame on it quite yet, but I would definitely lean more that way if he does beat this team. If he does, deny history out there in Kansas City, the first team, that could be a three-peat type team. But I mean, also too, the whole, championships and number stats. I mean, that's debates that we sports fans can talk about for years and years on end. Of you more so hear it in basketball, right? Of Bill Russell's got this many championships, or LeBron has this many, and Jordan's got this many. And if we just kind of talk about it with football, you mentioned, like Dan Marino had a tremendous career, obviously, didn't get that Super Bowl, unfortunately, but he's still a Hall of Famer, right? You look at the running game, Frank Gore, I think he's number 3 or 4 all-time in rushing yards, but I don't think he's going to get into the Hall of Fame. So it's looking at the entire body of your career, but I think that, in the 5 season that Jalen's been the quarterback for the Eagles. Like you said, he's already got them to the Super Bowl, and they've had a really good performance there. But if you can come back and now beat this Kansas City team, I think that definitely opens up a bigger conversation of, okay, is Jalen Hurts, a potential Hall of Famer once he wraps up his career in however many years he continues to play. But I mean, he's a guy who's been, relatively healthy throughout his career. He's played in 15 games at minimum every season so far. So as long as he can stay healthy, as long as he can keep going at this trend he's at right now, I don't see why he wouldn't be at the end of his career.
Yeah, and he's played in some big games to get there. They lost a couple years ago. Let me ask you this, Logan. I'll start with you. Same question for you in a second, Steven. Let's go on the other side of Patrick Mahomes. If they lose, does that affect his Hall of Fame status at all?
I don't think so. I don't think it does, just because the fact that in, I believe, the 7 years he's been in the league, they've either been to the AFC Championship and or Super Bowl in all 7 years. He's won a handful of MVPs, Super Bowl MVP as well. So I think that it's not going to tarnish or hurt his chances if they lose this Super Bowl, because I mean, there's a very good chance they'll be back here this time next year, if they've already done it for the last handful of seasons with the team they have constructed. But I don't think that'll take him out of any conversations, or that'll be like a blip for him saying, oh, hey, he didn't win this Super Bowl. But I would say it will be a little bit. I think that people might say, oh, hey, well, he lost this Super Bowl. Let's take it down a peg here from all the next greatest of all time, the Tom Brady talks. I think some people will go on that, but with the 7 years he's been in the league and the amount of work and credentials and accomplishments he's had for this team, I don't think it's going to make much of a dent in his Hall of Fame career.
Well, the reason I ask this, and Steven, let me go to you. I'm just using as an example the Dallas Cowboys, who dominated throughout the 70s and late 60s. Even though they didn't win against the Packers in those NFL championship games, they went and Super Bowl V, Super Bowl VI, et cetera, all the way up to 12 and 13. They were pretty dominant. And then guess what happens when Joe Montana plays them in the Candlestick game, the catch, and we didn't hear about the Cowboys for another 14, 15 years. Now, I'm not predicting the same thing for Kansas City, but you mentioned the Pete Carroll situation in terms of, gosh, if it wasn't for that one play, would he be an automatic? Because he would have won the second one, and that would have put him in. Now, there's a question. Is there a question if Patrick Mahomes loses this one, and then for some mysterious reason they don't get back again? It could happen. There's some great quarterbacks in the AFC. Just give me your thoughts and perspective on Patrick's side. We're going to still talk about the Eagles. Don't get me wrong. I just wanted to throw that in while we were talking about Hall of Famers.
In my opinion, Patrick Mahomes would have to pull a Pete Rose in order to not get into the Hall of Fame. He'd have to open up an account with DraftKings and spend millions of dollars, maybe betting against his team or against the spread in games that he plays. It would have to be something like that, in my humble opinion. The question, and Logan, you hit on it, you're absolutely right, is not about Patrick Mahomes as a Hall of Famer. It's where he ranks in the GOAT situation, the all-time greatest. Who are the all-time greatest quarterbacks? And as a historian, obviously, you have Joe Montana and you have Tom Brady. I think those are your top guys. Patrick Mahomes is a different quarterback from both of them. Those are more drop back into the pocket quarterbacks. Mahomes is a very athletic guy who can run. And that's really kind of the quarterback we're looking at and seeing in the modern day of professional football. But getting back to that question, Mahomes is probably in the top 3 to 5. You also have to compare, Johnny Unitas and Roger Staubach and Terry Bradshaw. And then you mentioned also, Logan, Dan Marino. I think he's in that conversation. And there are other great quarterbacks. I also might add regarding statistics. And, obviously the game has changed, but Joe Namath is in the legendary category. And, you know, he won a game 16-7, mainly because Johnny Sample had 4 interceptions of Earl Morrill and Johnny Unitas in that game. He was the real star of that game. And Bart Starr, who won 2 Super Bowls and 3 consecutive NFL championships. 65, they beat Cleveland in the NFL title game, which was considered the world title, even though the AFL existed. And then in 66 and 67, they beat the Chiefs and the Raiders in the first 2 Super Bowls. That's 3 straight. No one's done it since. Starr didn't throw for those kinds of yards, either career-wise or in any individual season. And I don't know how many 300-yard passing games he had in his career. Maybe a few, but it's pretty much, you know, the Lombardi sweep with Taylor and Horning. So a quarterback doesn't have to put up those numbers. You know, I'm a baseball guy. Baseball is really the sport you see numbers. 714, 755, you know, 4,191, 56 consecutive games. You know, these records that hold up in baseball. It's just one of these sports where they just count everything and you remember, and you can. Most people, unless they're really, you know, dedicated fans and numbers freaks, can't tell you, you know, Lamar Jackson's statistics on any, you know, given season. Logan probably can, because he's one of those guys. But it's not the same. In football and probably in basketball, you're really looking at rings. And baseball as well, but that's the big thing that we're talking about here.
Have some fun with me. There's a room, and in order to be in the room or to stay in the room, you have to have the approval of everybody else. Let's just start. You mentioned Terry Bradshaw. He's got 4. 4 is a great number. There's a very few human beings ever that have 4. Tom Brady can be in that room. Mahomes will get his 4th if they win. Does Drew Brees get to stay in that room?
Ooh, tough question. Tough question.
I saw Drew Brees play in college in 106-degree weather at the LA Coliseum. It was Carson Palmer's first game as a Trojan, as a true freshman in 1998. Brees did not win that game. No. Brees is a great player, but he's at a slightly lower elevation than these people that we're talking about. He is a great player, as is Fran Tarkenton, as is Otto Graham. Graham won a lot of titles, but I think people would say the real big gun on those teams was Jim Brown. That was the big reason that they won.
Let me throw another one at you. Jim Kelly, does he get to stay in the room?
I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, but he might not be in that same room. You know, we're talking about a VIP lounge, you know, with the nice-looking girls coming by with the drinks and
beautiful, and the tray.
Really, you're in the. He's in the other room, you know, and they're all having a good time, you know. But they're drinking Budweiser, and the guys we're talking about are drinking, Dom Perignon.
Yeah, they got champagne.
Yeah.
Does Ken Anderson he doesn't get to stay in the room, does he?
No, he does not.
No. How about does Bart Starr?
Yes. Yeah. Bart Starr is part of that pantheon.
Okay.
You know, and you have to, you know, these are people who also are the groundbreakers of the game. So, you know, have people broken Vince Lombardi's records? Yes, they have. They've put up more numbers. They've put up more wins. They've won more titles. Belichick has, you know. But, you know, Vince Lombardi is like Bill Russell in basketball or John McGraw in baseball, if you want to go back. These are the people who forged the game, and they're on this Mount Rushmore of the game.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the younger people might not understand that, but people our age, Harper and myself, we go back long enough that we remember, who they were and what they meant. And the game was just so different. It was, there weren't as many games. And so when they played, and, the home teams were not always on television if they were playing at home. So you listen to games on radio and you had, to me, pro football was Bill King on a radio announcing it, and George Blanda is king of the world, Branch, slot left, Bolitnikoff to the right, Stabler calling signals, Raiders 2 yards from the promised land. Are you kidding? And he actually announced 3 innings of a game I pitched one time, which I told him. He pretended to remember me, but we're getting beyond the scope here. But those are, that's what I'm saying. It's a Mount Rushmore that these early guys, Thomas Jefferson and, George Washington. And, there might be later presidents who were just as great, but we don't quite look at them it's the same way.
Yeah, one thing that is interesting of what you just mentioned there is that football was more, it was rare. I couldn't wait to get home Monday evening after a practice or whatever, school was over, and wait for you get all my schoolwork done and eat and be ready to watch halftime of Monday Night Football so I could listen to Howard and talk about 4 or 5 games, Bloomington, Minnesota. And then he would say that the Lions and the Vikings played. And those are the only highlights that I had. Let me throw another couple of names out there. Does Trent Dilfer, he's got a Super Bowl win. Does he get to stay at the table?
No, he gets to host ESPN Elite 11.
All right.
How
about Roger Staubach?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Plus Roger Staubach, he's an immortal on so many levels. First, he actually wins a Heisman Trophy and competes for a national title, gets to the Cotton Bowl playing for Navy. And then he's on a Swift boat in Vietnam. And then he makes it to the Cowboys. And incredibly, Tom Landry just made him suffer. As great as he was, he had to sit for something like 3 years behind Craig Morton. And Craig Morton is an underrated quarterback. He's a good quarterback, but he's not at the same level as these people we've been talking about. And I actually see Craig Morton around town where I live every so often. But Roger, but he does play on 2 Super Bowl losers against Bradshaw.
Well, he was on a third. Remember, Craig played in the Super Bowl V game where Jim O'Brien kicks the field goal with no time left on the clock. So Roger played in 5.
Did he play in that game, Harper?
Well, he was on the roster, and I don't know.
He was on the roster. I know Morton was there.
I was 8 years old, so I don't remember if he started in the game or what he did. But
I was at Kezar Stadium, San Francisco, to see Dallas beat the 49ers 17-10 as my Christmas present. The game that led them to play Baltimore in that. And that was a very disappointing day for me because the Super Bowl, I was hoping for a Bay Area Super Bowl. The Raiders in the morning lost to the Colts 27-17. So imagine how I can remember all this stuff. I can't remember the scores of the games this weekend, but I remember every little detail. And the Niners lost. They had John Brody, who's another all-time great. Hall of Famer, but he's also not quite in the room. He's over there drinking the Coors and the Bud. The other guys with the champagne. But he lost that day to Morton 17-10, and that was led to. And that was probably the worst Super Bowl ever played. It was a mistake-filled game. The MVP of the game was a guy named Chuck Howley.
Yep.
who was I guess he was a safety for Dallas. He had,
linebacker. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I think he had 2 interceptions on a losing team, and he's named MVP. That tells you the Colts. They had 2 quarterbacks. They've used both Unitas and Morrill. I think Morrill also played in that game, but it was basically Johnny U was their starting quarterback. So he did win a Super Bowl, but it was not his finest hour.
No.
It was Jim O'Brien really saved the day.
Does Unitas get to be at the table?
Oh, yeah, Johnny. That's Johnny Unitas. Come on.
What about Morrill?
No.
Okay.
Oral Morrill's in the University of Michigan Hall of Fame.
He won 2 now. He won that Colts game, and then he won with the Dolphins when he joined with Shula over there. All right, let me stick with the Raiders. You
know what? Oral Morrill, you mentioned that. I'd be willing to take a relook at Earl Morrill. He played, Earl Morrill was also in the movie Paper Lion when he was one of the quarterbacks for the Lions when George Plimpton, he went there and pretended to be a quarterback in some spring training or some exhibition games. He was a wonderful second guy. I mean, he was fabulous. He could come in and take over for Greasy or for Unitas. If you needed a guy, but you needed a good defense, you needed a running game, you needed something that he could work with. He wasn't going to lead you to the promised land, on the strength of his arm, like a Namath could, or a Stabler could.
Does Joe stay in the room?
Yeah, he's in the room just because he owns the bar Bachelor's 3. And he's providing all the ladies, so he's got to be there. So yes.
So Earl Morrill can help carry drinks with the ladies, but then he gets to walk out every now and then, and whatever. Joe gets to stay. Yeah. Does Snake get to stay? Stabler?
Yeah, because he's the one. Joe's brought all the Playboy playmates, and Ken has brought all the Raiderette cheerleaders of the early 70s who they had a sort of a Shattuck Avenue hooker look going, and so I think he's going to bring them in for to
and if nothing else, if the party dies down just a little bit, Snake's going to tell a story and then get everybody all ramped up, and he'll make everybody laugh, and it'll be hilarious.
Well, they're going to leave. Eventually they'll leave the champagne room and make their way to a dive bar or a strip club down the street, and that's going to be where Ken and Namath are going to be in their element.
There you go, and they'll meet with Breeze and everybody else that we haven't let in yet. All right, a couple more. I think I mentioned him earlier, but I didn't figure out whether or not he gets to stay in the room. Does Jim Plunkett get to stay?
If I've got my say, I'm gonna say, you know what, Jim, come on in. I'm gonna let him in. I'm a big Plunkett guy. You're just, it's too personal to me because the Raiders were my team. They were in those days in my growing up. That was the Raiders, and I mentioned the Raiders and Bill King. And that whole element that was so personal. I wrote a book about the Raiders, and Plunkett was a big star of that book. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly Oakland Raiders, it was called. It didn't even say L.A. Raiders, although it did cover their L.A. years.
Yeah.
And Plunkett did a lot of his best work in the L.A. Coliseum.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just a personal. He's just a personal favorite of mine, even though he's a Stanford guy and he beat USC. Mainly that's the game that vaulted him to the Heisman. But I just love Jim Plunkett.
We'll do 2 more, and then because Logan's going, when do I get it? But he never saw any of these guys play. You have to take all 3. It's an all or nothing deal. Theismann, Doug Williams, Mark Rippon.
I'd love to, but You know, if I was a Golden Domer, if I was a Notre Damer, yeah, I'd figure a way. Um, I just can't. And gosh, God bless them all great quarterbacks. Theismann won his Super Bowl in a weird year where there was a strike, so it was a strange season. And for Williams, for that matter, did the same thing. So those are the two of those Super Bowls that the Redskins have won. Let's call them the Redskins. Were in odd seasons that had strikes and replacements and other things. Rippon, I don't know what happened to Rippon. Can someone tell me beyond that season? He had a magnificent year on a team that was, I think, God, I want to say they were 14-2 or maybe even 15-1, a really good team under the great coach Joe Gibbs, who's another former Trojan assistant, and a San Diego State assistant with John Madden under at San Diego State under Don Coryell.
Don Coryell, yeah.
What great coaches they produced, but. Yeah, I mean, well, Theismann will talk his way into the room. He'll just talk his way in. The other two guys will probably they're probably.
Well, and then I'm wondering if Joe will end up talking his way out of the room because he may compare himself to Terry one time too many, and that'd be enough. Does Elway get to stay in the room?
Yeah, Elway gets in there at the very end because he won those last two. That really saved his career.
Sure did. He'd be with Jim Kelly having a Budweiser, right?
Out of my mouth. He was Jim Kelly. He really looked like, for all of his athletic ability, and he could do everything. He could run. He could throw. He was tall. He was the prototype then and now of the athletic quarterback who could do it all. And a gun for an arm. His wide receivers always. It really took him a while because when he would first throw, he would burn it in there and it would just bounce off their hands. And they had to learn how to really catch what he was throwing. So it took a while, but they eventually did. But he won those last two of his career. I mean, that's like Sandy Koufax finishing his career with 27 wins and the Cy Young Award. That's the way to go out.
Well, he and Roger can both sit at the 2 and 3 table because that's their records between it. Montana, any question? Is there any question at all?
No question.
Okay. And what about Steve Young?
He'd get very mad at you because he's got a big ego and likes his place in history.
That's why I asked it the way I did. There's no question Joe's in. What about Steve Young?
He's there with Marino and those guys, and he's not going to be drinking beer because he's
Mormon, so he's not going to drink a beer anyway.
He's a lawyer, so you never know. He may have to sue his way in.
All right, last two, Peyton and Eli.
Peyton, yes. Eli is a Hall of Famer, but not at the level.
Are you kidding me? All right. Well, that's an interesting perspective. Logan, anyone that I mentioned that you say you guys are out of your mind, he shouldn't be in, or that absolutely this guy should be in.
I mean, Harper, we had the same reaction, I think, to the Eli Manning comment at the end there. It's tough with Eli, right? Because, I mean, we know the great career he had, but it's really, I guess, just where you value his 2 Super Bowl wins over the Patriots at. Because, I mean, he did beat them that one year where they were undefeated and they were going to be, the greatest team of all time going, 17-0 with the Super Bowl. They were all the Dolphins fans were on the edge of their seat for that game before Eli pulled off that big upset. And then he beat them again in 2011, which was also a really good team there. But, I mean, I think, like I said, I think that we got a really cramped room, a lot of really good talent in here, and I know there's going to be a lot of drinks flowing, except for Steve Young. He'll be outside just hanging out.
Well, you didn't ask me whether it was a Hall of Famer. You asked me if he's in that room.
I'm asking, and if somebody's just tuning in, my question is how many of these quarterbacks that I'm going to mention get to stay in the room with the best of the best. And I said, Terry Bradshaw with 4, he's in the room automatically. Montana, we got to him. There's a couple others. Obviously, Tom Brady. I'm not missing him, ladies and gentlemen. We're giving Tom his props. Patrick Mahomes will be in that room, I believe, right? He's already there, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
I would say he's already got a spot, yeah.
Jalen Hurts, not yet.
If you watch that roast of Tom Brady that was on with, I think Nikki Glazer hosted it, it was almost pornographic. But
it's not triple X, but it's above R. It's worse than R.
Things that Gronk was saying, and I think he was drunk, and then the other guy, I guess
Edelman.
Edelman. I mean, the things that they were saying about their own anatomy. Brady almost looked embarrassed, but Eli Manning's name kept coming up, and as you know, he's your daddy type of scenario. That Brady could not beat Eli, and so Eli was not even in the room. He should have been in the room. I'm surprised they didn't invite him to be part of that panel, and he's funny enough and in front of the camera enough that he probably really could have handled the situation. Perhaps he chose not to. I don't know, but his name kept coming up.
Well, they're having a blast, if you ask me, and taking advantage of the shtick, if you will, of Eli not being invited to anything that Peyton is invited to that's involving Tom Brady. So Eli just going, hey, I didn't get invited, as if it's Brady who's the one who's not going to allow him to be, coming through the doors. It's pretty funny how they.
I mean, regarding that room, it's like there's Peyton going, not so fast, Eli.
Yeah, you're not. But
I'm just going to give him the Heisman.
You're giving Peyton access to the room, but like Brady, you're going to say, no, Eli, you got to go hang out with Drew Brees and with Jim Plunkett.
Yeah.
You got two.
I tell you, I wouldn't mind
Roger has two. Roger has two, and Elway have two. They can stay in the room, but you're 2-0, Eli, and you can't fit in the room. There's none. There you go.
Let's not forget, it's tougher to get to these Super Bowls and win it now than it used to be when Bart Starr or Joe Namath or Kenny Stabler were playing. They play more games. They play wild card games, and it's the harder road. And the college game, as we've talked about at length, is a much harder road than it used to be when, USC or Notre Dame or those guys would win the Rose Bowl or the Orange Bowl or something. And, then the Associated Press and the United Press International would award them a title, and, hey, we're the national champions. Ara Parseghian runs the ball into the line against Michigan State. They win the national championship, but don't even play a bowl game. Alabama's won a couple after losing bowl games, but that's been discussed.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting phenomenon. Am I missing anyone, Logan? Steven, am I missing a quarterback that deserves to be in that room that I didn't mention?
Trying to rack my brain.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I did. I know right. Please forgive me. Troy Aikman.
Yeah, a lot. Well, Logan, your take on that?
I think Troy gets in there. I think he's in the room.
3. That's all I have to say. 3. If 2 gets you in, 3 gets you in.
Yep.
Go ahead, Steven. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Wait a minute. Troy has 3?
Yeah. Yep. They got 3 in 4 years.
3 out of 4. Oh, okay. Then he won the 4th. Oh, that's right. Steve Young won, beat the Chargers, and then they hired Barry Switzer. Yes. Oh, well, that's, yeah. Now I've had conversations with people who talk about Aikman's lifetime numbers, and, I just kind of yawn, because I just don't think those numbers count like they do, Pete Rose's hits or Hank Aaron's home runs. The rings are what it's all about. And especially if you look at the history of the Cowboys, as you mentioned, they were lousy before he got there. They fired Landry, who was a statue in Dallas. and they bring in Jimmy Johnson, and who knows what kind of team they're going to have.
But 1-15, Stephen. That's what type of team they're going to have. That first year, they were 1-15. They were god awful, not atrocious, god awful.
And they've been ranging from fairly good to mediocre ever since. I mean, I don't understand the Dallas Cowboys, and they're the America's team. And Jimmy Johnson or Jerry Jones is this great owner, and they sometimes make the playoffs and get smoked out. They don't make it to the Super Bowls. They have all the money in the world. They have this incredible stadium. They have an insane fan base. What has happened to the Dallas Cowboys since Troy Aikman?
Also,
Dallas Cowboy fans, answer that.
Also, too, Steven, let's not forget the fact, too, that Dallas hasn't even made the NFC Championship game since the 90s. Right. They're the only team in the entire conference that hasn't made it since 2000. And theirs was right? even before that.
That's right.
Yep. Washington was the last team, I believe.
What's that?
Because it was them in Washington, then we just saw Washington just got knocked out.
Okay.
So they're the only team that hasn't made it since 2000.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's like the New York Yankees not getting in.
Well, I'm going to go two more guys, but one more round of this. And how much does John Madden and Pat Summerall have to do with this? So my first name that I'm going to say, does he get to stay in the room with only one, Jim McMahon?
No, it's a tough call, but he's gonna have enough fun drinking Budweiser.
There won't be a shortage of cold beer. Well, there will be around Jim, but he doesn't care. If Stabler can be in because he's going to be a great storyteller, then Jimmy Mack is going to be able to tell some of the best stories you've ever heard.
If I had the same affinity for the Bears as I do for the Raiders, I would be saying yeah. So you have to accuse me, and I have to stand convicted of favoritism for my teams, for the guys who did it when I was a kid.
And you're allowed that. I'm just saying, if anyone has any proximity to Chicago, Illinois, or even the Midwest, they would say, of course, Jimmy Mack gets to be in that room. He won't sit at the Bradshaw or Montana's table, but the table he's at will have more fun than those guys could ever imagine. You know why?
That's fair.
They're good. You know why? Because they're include the next one that I'm going to say. I've already let him in, and that's Brett Favre.
He has two, right?
No.
He only has one.
Who knows?
Yeah. Okay.
They lost the second one. Remember, they beat the Patriots, and then they lose
in
Denver. They allowed Elway to make it because they that Elway doesn't win that game. It's 0-4 for that guy. This one's for John.
What's your opinion? I'm gonna punt on this one.
Well, go, Logan. You go first.
I say you gotta let Brett in. I'd say you let Brett in. Yeah. Like I said, I know he's got just the one championship, like we just talked about with a bunch of other guys. But I mean, I don't think just passing ability, right? The yards, the cannon, loose cannon, we'll say, because we know he had a lot of interceptions as well. But I mean, when you think of gunslingers in the NFL, just pure passers, he's up there for sure. So I let him in.
Well, gunslinger to me means you're pretty reckless. You throw it hard, and you have no idea when it leaves your hand where it's going to go. You know some pitchers that are gunslingers, don't you, Steven? Some guys, as soon as I have no idea if this is going to go over the plate or if this is going to go into your ribs. No idea. No idea.
Randy Johnson, when I saw him first come up, he fell into that category.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's why I say Brett is. For a while, and I'm going to probably say next to a decade. And Jim McMahon the same way, because he was asked. I've got a friend who's a Bears fan who constantly reminds me of the 85 team. And one of the cool things about it is Pat Summerall says to Madden in probably a divisional or maybe a championship game, and John, we've got the Chicago Bears. Talk a little bit about the Bears and their leader, Jim McMahon. And Madden, in his way with his arms going around and booms and all the stuff that he does, he goes, without Jim McMahon, the Bears are a good team. but with him, they're a great team. And that to me is one of those criterias where every team has good players, but you add one more good player, and now you have the chance to be great. That's what Jim did for the Bears. Walter was with other quarterbacks, Hampton, McMichael, who was honored to be in the Hall of Fame. Congratulations, right? Wilbur Marshall, all these great players that they had on that team because they got to the next level. And Jim was the right guy to mess with Ditka and to tell him, stick it, dude. Yeah. We're going to win this way. Brett, kind of the same way. There would be times where Mike Holmgren would just tear his hair out. He'd be so upset that Brett made a throw, but he made a difference, not only for the Packers, but in the league. People talked about it more, and people had fun. Frank Caliendo has so much fun teasing Madden and imitating him and talking about Brett Favre, and everyone kind of laughs. Because, yeah, that's right. I remember that. That's an important part of the history of the league.
Yes, and he really was in the league as it became an ESPN 24-hour highlight reel, which when we were kids you didn't get, which is why you watched Howard Cosell saying, and Fran Tarkenton, son of a preacher man, versus Joe Willie Namath. You waited for that. Yeah. You don't have to wait for that anymore. And Favre was part of that. McMahon, my question is, how did he make it through 4 years at Brigham Young University without being tossed out of that place? I have been to Brigham Young, and it's a tight ship. And I don't know how he did that, but how was he wired? What was going on with McMahon? Was it an act? Was that really who he was? Is he like that in private, like with his wife and kids?
A Jersey, kid from New Jersey initially. They moved to Utah. He was an option quarterback, hurt his knee in high school, so he had to throw. And next thing you know, he the only place that wanted him was BYU. I will say this, after the SMU game, and that obviously was a seal the deal in terms of his legacy, right? But I think he left the NCAA with 59 different records, passing records, 59. Just amazing what he was doing. And some of them are like most for 200-yard, 250-yard, to 300-yard. Just some of the stuff is semi-redundant, but nonetheless, an amazing time while he was there. And when he was done, after his senior year, he went to play golf, and he was on the course. He put a beer down, and somebody called, and said, hey, there's this quarterback, and he's drinking beer, and he's barefoot on the golf course. And Lavelle Edwards ended his scholarship right then and there, and they cut ties with him. But only and only and only after he was done helping out that football team to get to a level it had never been at before.
Yeah, he's like the Hunter S. Thompson of football players, like his legend is almost bigger than the reality of what he was all about. But I mean, the stuff he did, and like I say, there was obviously a method to his madness. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I played against him and with him, and I understand him.
Really, you played with him?
He doesn't have.
What do you say?
I'm sorry, Stephen. I was talking when you were. I apologize. I didn't hear your question.
Well, you said you played with him.
Yes.
So, what we saw is what the public saw? Was that the real Jim McMahon, or was there some other retrospect, other side to him?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because there are some players they have it shut off, and when the cameras are on, they turn it on, and they know when the cameras are on, and it's a different perspective. Jim that's pretty much who you got. He doesn't take it too seriously. Yeah. He really relishes and embraces the fact that you can make fun out of football.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all serious, and when it is, it just kind of messes everybody up. But you got to practice hard. You got to be in those situations so that it can work. I remember there was a preseason game, and Jim got a lot of time to play in the preseason, and they put me in for whatever reason. And I'm with 5 linemen that all were looking, their eyes were wide open. It was their first chance to play. We're playing the Jets. And Jim says, excuse my language. He's all right, you son of a bucks. And he used a different word. Listen, I don't want any of you guys going home without giving this a shot and to be your very best. Make this team play well right here, right now. Block like crazy, all right? Red right, 14 stick on two. Ready, break, and we break the huddle. And, he drops back, and within a half a second, there's some guy that is coming out of nowhere. One of the guys missed his block, and, we have to punt 3 plays later. But his leadership in the huddle is something that I really valued. He didn't have to grab you by the face mask. But he just say 1 or 2 things. Okay, it's serious. And when Jimbo Covert, Tom Thayer, when Keith Van Horn all embrace him first when they score a touchdown, that to me speaks volumes about how much they love and they cared for this guy, and they wanted no one else to be a part of that team, that specific Bears team. It was a very tough one to be around, and Jim was the right guy at the right place.
Well, I interviewed Keith Van Horn, and I asked him these kinds of questions, and I got a similar answer about McMahon when I interviewed Van.
Yeah. He couldn't throw 2 spirals in a row, especially in Chicago. It didn't matter, though, but he'd get the ball to the guy that he needed to, when he needed it. He had a very catchable ball. Let me put it that way. He didn't have the strongest arm. Like when I was with him in Philadelphia, Randall Cunningham, who could throw the ball 85, almost 90 yards, it seemed like. I mean, Randall had that big windup like a pitcher where the ball would really separate from, and I'm knocking stuff around in my house, but a windup where most guys, Elway and Marino, threw from their ear. Everything was here from the shoulder forward. Randall went way back behind, and so
Randall got taught how to play football by his older brother Sam, who was a running back, not a quarterback.
Right.
So John Elway, of course, he learned from his father, who was a coach, and he was strictly by the numbers.
Yeah, but when I was in Philly now, because of his connections with Buddy Ryan in Chicago, he was a backup there, and he and Randall Cunningham did not really get along at all. In fact, Jim would not call him by his name. Just call him number 12. You're 12.
Really?
Yeah, because he didn't – they were at odds at the work ethic and what plays to call and what you could do. And, Jim assessed the guys that were in the huddle. You're going to call different plays when this guy's in as opposed to when he's out. And it wasn't about number 12. It was about the team. It's never about number 9. It was about the all of them. Yeah, one of the great tragedies in all of football is the Super Bowl that Chicago wins, and Walter Payton, of all people, doesn't get a touchdown. They scored 8 touchdowns in that game, and Walter didn't get any.
But Refrigerator Perry is getting those.
Correct. And Walter had a tremendous chip on his shoulder about that for years. And Jim was the guy that goes, hey, sorry, but we won. Who cares?
Yeah, well, you won the game. I mean, holy cow, you won a Super Bowl. That's how I would feel about it,
Well, we've digressed as much as we possibly can, folks, but thank you for letting us go off the rails a little bit. We were talking about the Eagles and the game itself and Jalen Hurts. The next thing you know, we're talking about Hall of Fame and going all over the place and ending with Jim McMahon and Brett Favre. But any final thoughts regarding that first game, the Washington-Philadelphia game? Obviously, the Eagles are a great. And before we went on the air, you were saying how specifically that they're the best team in football right now.
They might be. They won it 2 years ago. So this is, if they win it, it's certainly not a fluke. I mean, they beat Patrick Mahomes once before. So they have to be going in with some confidence. On the other hand, Patrick Mahomes is like any great player, full of pride. And I'm not going to let the Philadelphia Eagles beat me again. So it's going to be a clash of titans.
Logan, your thoughts on Philly? Did they impress you? I know deep down you were thinking, man, I think the Commanders have a chance here. But few and far between in terms of our wishes. I was kind of rooting for Washington too. My heart said, gosh, it'd be great if this team actually went. My mind was going, I don't know if they've got what it takes. You got to be out of your gourd to think that Philly's not going to play their best game right now.
Yeah, the unfortunate storybook ending that for Washington. It's over, right? It happened with Detroit last year with the run they had, and this year it was Washington, and just a tremendous year. They far exceeded any expectations, even I'm sure their fans had, making it to the NFC Championship game. But just talking about the Eagles, I mean, they look like the complete package. They look like one of the best teams, and obviously they are the best team to go up against these Chiefs, and that could potentially beat them. I mean, their offense is obviously on point when you get 7 rushing touchdowns. Saquon Barkley he's proved himself as the best running back in the league. Jalen Hurts had a phenomenal game as well, and their defense it shut down one of the best offenses in the league too, with the dynamic rookie in Daniels. But they look great, and they're hitting their stride. They're getting hot at the right moment. But you got to knock off the Kings first, and that's out in KC.
Yeah, Steven, let me go into that. I know you're a member of the Bills Mafia because you were out there, a honorary member. You played, you watched the play of your 49ers against Buffalo in Orchard Park when the two teams played about 2 months ago. My question to you is, you got Cincinnati, Baltimore, you've got definitely the Bills. The Steelers are close. How do those franchises in the AFC get past this monster, this 800-pound gorilla in the room called the Kansas City Chiefs?
You're talking about the teams those are not the teams in their division. Those are those are good teams in the AFC is what
great teams that probably, Buffalo had probably one of their best teams.
It's just like there was a time when, the Los Angeles Rams were a really good team in the NFC in the 1970s, but they couldn't get past the other teams, namely Dallas. And they would even they had games where they played Dallas at home. I remember in 75, I believe that year, the Rams set an NFL record for fewest points allowed per game and were absolutely smoked in the NFC title game at the LA Coliseum, home game, everything in their favor. So, these teams are up against it. There's only one way out. You just have to keep digging and keep fighting and be a professional and, hope that you're, the other thing is that eventually time plays its tricks. You take another sport, take like Novan Djokovic, is that his first name?
Novak
Djokovic. For years, you had the Swiss guy and the Spanish guy, and they were the two best players. And then slowly but surely, they kind of faded away from injury. And now Djokovic has broken all their records. Does that make him the greater player? But he's young enough. So, what you're really probably talking about is who's going to be around when Mahomes loses a step. And you never know when that can happen. You can lose a step at any point. Namath, had injuries, and he only was great for a couple of years. And you're really lucky to play 4 or 5 years in the NFL with the injuries that players have. It really is an amazing. It is an amazing thing to be able to do that because it's so easily you can be injured. But until that time comes, you just have to keep fighting and scratching and clawing. There's no other way because you can't hope your way in, and you can't wish your way in.
Well, Kansas City has certainly earned their way in, and early insight in terms of just what do you expect, Logan, returning back to you in this. I don't know what the spread is. I don't even care right at this time. I'm just thinking, what are your basic observations of the Chiefs and the Eagles getting a chance to play here in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, this is two great teams going at it, right? You saw with Philadelphia, they put up so many points. I mean, just so many points. And you look at KC, and they had to claw and scratch their way into this game against a very game Buffalo team that if a couple of calls had went their way, if a couple of drives had resulted in touchdowns instead of field goals or turnovers or whatnot, that we'd be talking about Buffalo in this case. But Kansas City, like we've said all year, Harper, they just find ways to win. And that is what good teams do. That's what good coach teams do as well. Credit to Andy Reid. Remember, for years in Philadelphia, coincidentally, he always had the moniker of he can't win the big game, he can't get it done, he can't do this and that, and so on and so forth. And now here he is looking for his third straight championship with this franchise. So another chapter he gets to write in this one, facing off against his old team one more time. But for going into the Super Bowl, I'm expecting KC. Their defense to obviously be locked in, as we've been watching year after year. And that's a big reason why they won their Super Bowl last season. Yes, they have a great offense, but I think their defense is just as good, if not greater. Another thing, too, is you have to always just watch out for that, the legendary duo of Mahomes and Kelsey. You'd always talk about Brady and Gronk, and I mean these two are right up there with them in terms of great teammates and quarterbacks and tight ends. Look, I get Travis. He had a great game in the divisional round. He was kind of quiet in the conference game against Buffalo, but it's the Super Bowl. All eyes are on you, and we've seen Travis make big plays, so expect that. But I think Kansas City, they're poised, right? Obviously, they've been here a time or two or three now. And they know going into this game what to expect. They know that if you're not from Kansas City, everyone is rooting against you, and that they don't want you to win. Because you either love dynasties or you hate them. You love them if they're your team. You hate them if you're not. So we'll see if they can keep rolling here. But I expect just a heavy dose of KC to look like they have been in years past, and that's confident. You don't see them get rattled much at all either. You don't see them commit any dumb turnovers or penalties. This is a really disciplined team, and that's why they've been on the run they are. And they might get another championship. Who knows? We'll see here in a couple of weeks.
Stephen, an interesting point there that I think of. Sometimes when you played against the Michael Jordan dynasty year teams, if Michael's averaging 32 points a game, and by the way, he's done that, right? And well, if I can hold him to 24 or 25 points, do I have a chance to win? Will that 5 or 6, 7 point differential be enough? It looked like the numbers. Saquon had a very good game. He rushed for over 100 yards, about 140. So fantastic for him. Everyone else was kind of whatever. In both teams that won, because they're good enough to win without big numbers. Well, guess what? We just need more points than you do. And that's the thing that captures my curiosity about Kansas City, is that they are they don't have to break a record to beat you. They could do it with 10 points. They can do it with 45. It doesn't matter. Every game is a little bit different, and you never know what you're going to get. So give me your thoughts about this first look that we'll have between these two teams.
It kind of remind me of Tom Seaver, a great pitcher who talked about the art of pitching. In I say this because he said what he was looking for was each individual game, there was an opening in that game. There was a portal to victory that had to be discovered, and he had to discover it. And on this particular day, that was going to be his way of winning. It could be his great fastball. It could be he might not have that. It might be the slider. It might be working the corners. It might be understanding that an umpire likes the high strike, and that's where he's going to go. Right. And so that's what I think an Andy Reid team does. They will go into this game, and they are going to probe and look and fight for the way to win the game. And a good example last year was against Detroit. They were kind of getting eaten up by Jared Goff in the first half, and they shut him down in the second half of that game. Now, it would obviously seem that, okay, here's what we have to do. We got to shut down Saquon Barkley. Cannot let Saquon Barkley get 180, 200 yards, score 3 or 4 touchdowns. Then if they can do that, does Jalen Hurts make up the difference and open it up? And that's where they're going to have to plug that hole. So obviously, Reed is a great coach, and he's looking at all those variables, and he's also looking at the other variables, like who else is, there are other really good players on the Philadelphia Eagles, all of whom would love to make their name and be in the glory annals of Eagles football, along with Tommy McDonald and Norm Van Brocklin and Dick Vermeil and everybody else. And these are not the players, but I assure you that Andy Reid and his coaching staff are keying on every one of those guys and trying to figure out, as the game goes on, how the flow of the game is going. And that's what the great coaches do. Sometimes you are losing in the first half of the game. The other team is moving the ball. And then you make an adjustment and you shut it down, like they did with Goff and the Lions last year. So that's why I would even and on the other hand, the Eagles are just as experienced, or almost as experienced. They are a veteran team, highly talented. It's a clash of titans. I don't really know that you can just say Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes, because of their experience and their greatness, are automatically the favorite. I think it's maybe they're a slight favorite, but it's pretty much an even battle as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. In preparation, it's going to be a key. It reminds me, I've told the story before, but if you haven't heard it, just enjoy it. It's kind of funny. NFL Films back in the day, they were in Denver, and it wasn't Red Miller, but it was the head coach of the Denver Broncos. Yeah. And they have a picture of him. And he's got his hands on his knees. You could see they cut away from him, and they show the visitors are at about the 8-yard line, and they're getting ready to throw a play in, and they're in the huddle. And then the coach the screen cuts to him, and the coach is on his knees. He says, "Watch for the draw." And then they go to the players on the field, and they break the huddle, and they line up. He goes, no, back to the coach. "Oh, watch for the screen." And then they show the quarterback, and he's just getting ready to call the signals. And then the coach is cut away to again. He goes, "Watch the reverse." And then they go, and the quarterback is just about to snap the ball, and the coach says, "Oh, damn it, just watch for everything." And then they run the play. You got to watch for everything. You got to be prepared for everything, and that's just one of the keys.
Those NFL films were just glorious. And Hank Stram was so great, and he would be in there, he's fixing his tie, and he looked great. And he was going, "Keep matriculating down the field, boys. Keep matriculating down the field." He had all these terms. And then they'd have the great John Madden. He would tell this great story about, well, we're playing the Chiefs, and we've had some problems in the locker room. And I went up to Hank and I said, "Hank, we got a problem in the Chiefs locker room. We got rats in the locker room, but we're gonna take care of it. But this game, we got rats. So I'm sorry what to say, So then they cut. There was like some picture of Dawson standing on a stool, putting his shoes on, and of course the Raiders won that ball game. I mean, there was a lot of gamesmanship that was going on, especially the old AFL. That was a truly remarkable league.
Yeah, crazy stuff that takes place that nobody sees. Going into the locker room after a game and the hot water doesn't work. Isn't that mysterious how, it's snowing outside. Their team is taking showers, but the others, I've been involved with that. So I know and understand. I rolled up that paper on purpose. Mr. Official, you got to make that. Oh, that's a great call, Mr. Official. Hank Stram was amazing. It is what it is. All right, that's our AFC, NFC coverage. Let's talk about something that is kind of serious in terms of preparation for the upcoming year and especially the draft, and that'll be the Senior Bowl. First take on that, Stephen. What is the Senior Bowl? Not one, we won't go over all the players itself, but is that something that will get a few minutes of your viewing time this weekend?
Well, I don't really know that the Senior Bowl is a game that the fans care a lot about, but it's definitely a game that players and scouts care about, and it's coming out of a place like Colorado State, you can understand that you're not going to get the attention that you're going to get at one of these really big schools, and you're probably not going to play in the really big games that are scouted. And these scouts love all these playoffs, as I said, because it gives you a chance not just to see the athleticism of the players, but the performance of players in high pressure situation, because there's nothing more important than the ability to perform at a high pressure situation, and gauging that. So the Senior Bowl is just as another opportunity to be seen. And for, athletes like myself, who struggled to get a scholarship and to be seen and to be noticed, you're always wondering who's in the stands, who are the scouts, who are those guys, those radar guns those guys have. And these are the guys who are playing in the Senior Bowl. Now, some of them are, top level, Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame type players, but others played at Pittsburgh, or they played at Utah, or they played someplace and weren't seen quite as much as the others. So that's what it counts for them for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. The competition is an important factor. Logan, your first thoughts? I probably won't be watching it. Will you? Will you be paying any attention to the Senior Bowl, or do you just want to hear what the highlights were at the end of the game?
I'll probably just watch the highlights of it, Harper. I think that for the Senior Bowl, it's more so that if there are bigger names in there, right? Perennial first round draft picks, you might tune in, just see what they want, what they do, right? But for me, the Senior Bowl is a time for players who aren't getting looked at as much, who might come from smaller schools, who might be a predicted later round draft or potentially even undrafted, to elevate their stock. There's been many times over the years since they've been doing the Senior Bowl where, some players might be at a smaller school. They'd go there and they'd put on a tremendous performance and they'd elevate their draft stock. They'd become, maybe a third round pick or a fourth round pick or whatnot, and just move up when they might not have gotten those looks during the regular season. So I'm looking forward to see just who might be some of the standouts from some of the smaller schools that you don't hear a whole lot of coverage about, and see where they can go on the draft board come the NFL draft in April.
Yeah, I agree, Stephen, with what you were saying in terms of the importance for the average fan is minimal, but the importance for the coaches, the general managers, for personnel directors to get to see the top probably 8 tackles, 8 guards, 4 or 5 centers going against the best of the rest. And if you're from a smaller school, SMU's not a smaller school. They were in the playoff, but let's say there's a player that, we watched him play during the season, but he wasn't going against an All-American like he is right now in practice. And you get a chance to see how they react to certain things. It's an invaluable tool. They used to have the East-West Shrine game, and that was up in San Francisco. The Japan Bowl, the Blue-Gray game, and the Senior Bowl was in Mobile for a while. But it's just one centrally located place, and you couldn't ask for a better situation. It's kind of like a mini combine, if you will, and right before the situation where, they're going to leave for a couple of months, go get ready for the actual combine. So you get to see them in pads one more time.
Yeah, well, I remember interviewing Bill Walsh and doing some research for a 49er book, and he paid a lot of attention to the East-West Shrine game and all those games, as well as workouts that those guys were doing. And he discovered players in workouts. He discovered Dwight Clark because he was looking at a Clemson quarterback named Steve. You remember that guy's name, Harper? Anyway, and Clark just was brought along for the workout, and he liked Clark so much, so I'm going to draft that guy.
Yep.
So, a lot of those players, the East-West Shrine game, I think that was the really great game, but that was a lot of games. I mean, you couldn't play in all of them. Some players would play in the East-West, others would be in the Blue-Gray, others would be in the Senior Bowl. it it was, but it was a lot of fun for the athletes. Also, they loved going to the Shrine game because they would go to the hospital with these kids who worshiped them and were being given wonderful treatment by the Shriners. Shriners Hospital really was doing the same work then, and I think they still do. That St. Jude does.
Yeah.
They're really doing God's work, and these players, these 300-pound mammoth players were brought to tears by these young kids who worshiped them. It was a scene.
Yeah, there's nothing like a sick kid that can't bring you to your knees in terms of your emotions and let you realize that, boy, I got it pretty good, don't I? So the games itself, there's a significance and an importance. There's a relevance for it, and not only just from a professional standpoint, but obviously from the charity work that is accomplished. I know a friend of mine that went and was invited. He was loaded up, didn't know any better. He didn't know the experience, but his equipment manager said, all right, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you 10 of our T-shirts that have our Colorado State name on it. And he came back with probably 20 T-shirts in return because he got an SC shirt, he got an SMU shirt, he met a buddy that was and they just traded stuff left and right. That's why you see everybody wearing somebody else's helmet decal. It's just kind of pay tribute to the camaraderie that you develop with some of these guys. That's pretty fun.
Hey, did you ever play the California North-South Shrine All-Star football game?
No, those are for good football players. If you're good, you get to play in those, Steven.
You were a superstar at a Notre Dame High.
I was an all not very good. Just what are you doing on this? You're
malarkey.
I was, full.
You and John Vella and Mark Harmon are the three greatest players ever to come out of Notre Dame High School.
Well, I'm Brad Johnson and some of the other quarterbacks that you said, hey, your room's over there, kid. Get over there. That's where I was. Well, speaking of games that have significance and all that, it's certainly not the Pro Bowl. If you could take anything else away from that game, please try to, because there's nothing left to take away. It's just not even a game anymore. It's basically just a fun it's a backyard party is what I pretty much determined that the Pro Bowl is now. Logan, your thoughts first and foremost about not only the significance or lack thereof, but just, how do you market an all-star game when you don't have a game?
It's tough. Look, they're doing flag football now. We already know the Pro Bowl is just for a way to players to get the recognition to say, hey, I'm a Pro Bowler, and go out there, have fun with their teammates or, friends from other teams or whatnot, and just socialize basically at a beautiful spot. But really, guys, I've never been a fan of like, oh man, the Pro Bowl's coming out. I can't wait to watch it. And even I applaud their efforts for trying something new with switching it to flag football, with doing now the skills competition with like greatest catch, and I think the old linemen are doing like the best spike of the football or something along those lines. So they're trying carnival games at this point. But I don't know. I don't know how you capture the audience. One thing that I liked about baseball that I wish that they brought back, that they took away, and Steven, you know this, where the All-Star game is in the middle of the season in July, I believe, and it used to be, they took it away about 5 or so years ago, I would say, that the winner of that game got home field advantage in the World Series. Yeah. I don't know why they took that out. I was always interested in the All-Star game in baseball for that reason, and since they took it out, I just watch it for the home run derby now. Or like in the NBA, I watch it for the three-point contest or the slam dunk contest. With the NFL, I don't get that feeling for whatever reason. I don't know if you bring back like just other stuff, because I know, if your quarterbacks throw it through the moving targets or whatever, but I don't know what you do. But they're trying something at least. I applaud them for saying that, hey, this might be a sinking ship in terms of ratings. Let's see what we can do to maybe boost it back up. But I'm still, it's not moving the needle, and I'm not changing the channel for it. So I hope they have a great time. I hope they enjoy the weather, get some good sun, get some good food. But usually for me, this is going to be another year of, oh yeah, the Pro Bowl's on. All right, sounds good. I'll see if there's any cool highlights.
Steven, your thought? I saw you nodding a few times during that.
I think the NFL should hire Kate Bosworth to show up with a surfboard. and that'll get the attention of the players. Right now, it's it's no more interesting than watching O.J. Simpson run a 100-yard dash against Bruce Jenner in the Superstars competition. Against with the captain of the Love Boat, pulling up the rear there. That was more interesting than the Pro Bowl is today. I went to a Pro Bowl at the Coliseum when they actually played a football game, and it was actually a pretty good game with actual hitting. No, but the money is such that you just can't afford to have a guy get injured playing. That always I always was interested in the way Pete Carroll coached at USC. Whether he does this in the pros where you play more games, I don't know, but he really would set up practices which were just game type practices, full pads, and he had injuries. But out of those came incredible competition, and he would start a sophomore, or he would start a freshman over a junior or a senior if he won those competitions. And it was a new competition in practice every week. And this is really nothing to do with the Pro Bowl, but it speaks to the question of going all out on a field in a situation that isn't a competitive game, where something's on the line, but there's still something to be said for, a hard practice, or, going out there and really playing hard. You're improving as a player when you do that. And so I don't think these players are improving as players by the experience that they're having on the Pro Bowl. They're just having a good time in Hawaii.
Well, they were in Hawaii. That has stopped. They're in Orlando now. I thought that was the great reward, but I think it, I remember watching when I was younger, and I'd want to see what color uniforms, because everybody got to keep their helmet, right? So you see a Packer yellow helmet and a Bears dark navy helmet, all on the same white jersey with blue pants. And then on the AFC side, they had a red jersey with white pants and whatever it was. And then the jerseys started getting a little wilder. They put more stars on it, and they put your team logo somewhere on it. But then they just got to the point where it was more frills, more sizzle than steak. And that to me, I think, was the beginning of the end. And plus, nobody played any defense. You get kind of in trouble amongst the players if you tackle too hard. That was a tough way to govern it, because one guy is always going to give 100%. You can't tell how long to tone it down. He's not going to do it. And other guys would go out there, and then they go, "Oh, I'm hurt. I can't play." It interfered with the Super Bowl. It interfered with a lot of stuff. So just play paper football or do something, but don't wrap this up and tell me I'm getting a horse or a unicorn. With this, I'm not even getting a football game. It's just, it is what it is. It's their way of saying we're going to have an all-star recognition, but without a game. And Logan, what interests you? Steven, did you have a thought on home field advantage for baseball?
I have mixed feelings about that. I did think it did make the game more interesting. It stemmed from, I believe, in 2002, the teams played to a tie through 10 innings, I think it was. Joe Torre was the manager of the American League, and I believe Dusty Baker managed the National League, and Bud Selig came down. And, it was a great game. Barry Bonds had a huge game that day, and the players were putting on a spectacular show of both pitching, defense, and power. And the fans, both at the game and in the stands on television, all of a sudden we're not going to play anymore. We run out of pitchers, and that was not a good look for baseball at that particular time. So I think they made a good move. On the other hand, do I want to have a team that wins 108 games or 105 games, but we don't get the home field advantage in the Super Bowl because in the World Series because a closer for the Seattle Mariners, who's not on our team, had a lousy game and walked the bases loaded and allowed the National League to win. And so here we are with maybe 104 victories, 105 victories, and some National League team with 89 or 90 wins has snuck in, and they've got the home field advantage. So I understand why they did it, but I understand the other side as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting in terms of the marketing of it. Hey, you know that both squads will have a predominance of players that are either in first place, second place, or at least in the playoff run there at the halfway point of the season. So how do we motivate them to play a little bit harder? Because they're going to have a couple of beers with the guys. Next thing you know, they're the night before they're at the home run derby. They're not giving they're just not giving any effort. So let's do that. And someone in the league said, terrific. And I agree with you. I'm the team that wins. I'm the number one seed. And then I got to go in the World Series and play on the road for my first two games. I'm rewarded with that because of an all-star game that 90% of my team wasn't a part of. I see the marketing, and now more people are watching, which is what is the most important thing for the league. But in fairness to the team, I don't know how, Logan, justify that for me. I don't like that format, and I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying I personally don't like it. What can you do to motivate the players in a different way? Is there something that we could do? And we'll go to the commissioner someday and say this is a great idea, and it'll bring significance. The players will want to contribute even more, but it won't affect who wins the World Series.
I think just in terms of not just baseball, but really all-star games, you can kind of point to this, or Pro Bowls, whichever. And because, I mean, that's just kind of been in it feels more so recent years than not of, it's the All-Star break or whatever, and here's a game, but it's just for fun and tell. Or the NBA, they had, what was it, like the first team to reach 300 points or whatever, they would win the game. That got the public was not thrilled about that, so they changed it up for this season. They're doing like the 4 mini tournaments, but for baseball specifically, I like I said, I see the reasoning why they got rid of it, but at the same point, it is at the halfway point of the season where it's the best of the best of for whichever team, right? If the Yankees are in first, say they get 3 or 4 players. If if the Angels make a run and they get a player or two in there. And say if, like you said, Steven, if the Mariners closer, if he blows the game for me at the end, then I'm not going to be happy with him because, man, you just cost me a spot or a home field advantage in the World Series. But also at the same time, I forget the number off the top of my head, but for the most part, if you have the most wins in the regular season, more often than not, surprisingly, you don't win the World Series for whatever reason that may be. And that's why baseball is the longest season. There's 162 games, so on and so forth, and there's so many other factors that you can go into. But I think that for all these all-star games, they're trying to just find ways to keep the players motivated. Because if the players are motivated, that increases viewership, which is good for everyone, right? It's more money in the CBAs. It's more money for the players, for the GMs, for whatnot. So I don't know if it's you just throw more cash at them. Because that's always an option. But I don't know if you can go, especially for football. I don't know if you can go back to the traditional just regular football game, AFC, NFC, because I mean now these guys are just gonna, like I said, they're gonna relax, they're gonna have a couple drinks with their friends, and it's like, I get to go play flag football tomorrow, like you would do at a Saturday rec league. Yeah, but I've been racking my brain with this for years. I can't come up with a solution, and I think it's clear that most of the governors or the owners the commissioners for all these major sports leagues can't figure it out either. So I'll join that line with them.
Yeah, Steven, it's almost to me, let's do everything but play a football game for the All-Star game. And with baseball, it's an exhibition. That's the thing. It's an exhibition game. It doesn't mean anything. It'll never go down in your final stats. You could hit 7 home runs in the game. Doesn't matter. It goes in All-Star history. That's fine, but it's not. It doesn't count. So, do you have an option, Steven?
Well, I just have memory. I've been to 2 baseball All-Star games, and 2 entirely different experiences. 2007, I believe it was, All-Star game, Pac Bell Park, San Francisco. At the time, I was in the media. I was a working member of the press corps. I had a press credential. I was there before the game, mingling with the players in the clubhouses, talking to the managers, part of the press conferences, in the press box, which is a good view of the game, and plus you have the TV on the screen in the press box. So it was a fantastic experience for me. I was really blessed to be there. 2 years ago, Dodger Stadium, 2022. Last second, I buy a ticket on MLB at the last second, and we're talking the Bob Uecker seat at Dodger Stadium. I'm in the right field, way at the very top, where you really have a better view of Glendale than you do of home plate at Dodger Stadium. And it was just it was not very much fun. I mean, I could hardly tell who the players were. They were just guys down on the field. The announcer would announce who it was. The fans that sat around me were just kind of, I don't know. You really need to have good seats to be to enjoy it. And so I prefer to watch it on television. It's just on TV. You can see who the guys are. You can see their statistics. They have commentary on them, and it wasn't a few years ago. They still wore their team uniforms. For some reason, they've now gone to these ridiculous American or National League uniforms that are, I don't know what they are, city field uniforms or something like that. I don't know what their thinking is. It's not good thinking. They've overthinking it. That's baseball. The same probably applies to football. At this point, the basketball All-Star game is probably more interesting because of the dunk contest, which is always fun. The home run contest is great, but it gets old. It's just, there's another one, so the dunk contest might be slowly surpassing the baseball home run contest, in my view.
Yeah, as much as we like it, the back from Chris Berman did get a little bit tiresome. So they responded by saying, let's get the fans to buy some jerseys that they'll never wear. So,
you'll wear for that day and that day only.
American, national, whatever. Well, I think my solution, guys, is paper football. For football, for basketball, for baseball, for hockey, best one wins. You can have your goalposts like this, which I don't like because my fingers are long. I think I'm giving you a bigger chance. I need to shrink my goalpost or something like that. Or you can do it the other way where you got it like, it doesn't matter. But paper football will solve the world's problems. I'm convinced of it right there. So you heard it first. Final thoughts, Logan, as we wrap up the show. We've talked a little bit about AFC, NFC championships, Senior Bowl, Pro Bowl, and a lot of Hall of Fame.
Yeah, always nice to take a trip down memory lane and talk about all those great quarterbacks and players we mentioned. Who's in the room, who's out of the room. That was always nice to look at those players. But yeah, I mean, I'll see what happens at the Senior Bowl. See if there's any players that kind of shoot up the draft boards that just steal the show, or maybe some might not have great performances. Their draft stock might tank a little bit. So I'll see how that goes around the end of the week. But nice to reflect once again on the championship games, right? NFC, AFC. One really good matchup and one that was is over really before it felt like it even started for Washington with the drumming from Philadelphia. But always fun to be on the show here, guys, and looking forward to it again next week.
Stephen, this will be our last time that we have this type of format. Next week, we're going to have a formal guest that we're going to have, but give us your final thoughts here on Take 5.
Well, my thoughts are with the fans of the Buffalo Bills. God bless them. They are really, really good fans. I spent time with them, and they really deserve a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl title. They've been denied it again. They have a great team. They have a great quarterback who's just, I mean, you could see the pain in his face and in his voice as he answered questions, and he did it with class. But he didn't win, and you have to get it done. And it's a tough game. It's a tough racket, professional sports, to be the best. So many great athletes try, and so many fail. Many are called, few are chosen. And so what we're seeing are the few, the best, and the survivors, and the ones who are playoff worthy. They've been built for the playoffs, and here they are. And so I don't know who's going to win, and I don't know even who I'm rooting for. I think it's going to be a clash of titans.
Yeah, I'm interested with your adopted team in Buffalo. Do they automatically vote, or not vote, but do they root for the Eagles? Just you have to.
Yeah, I think
you have to.
The league always tends to root for the league. And so I think that'll be, you want to feel like you lost to the team that went all the way. On the other hand, as you're watching them, prance up and down the field, there's Taylor Swift with Travis Kelce, it's like, I could be there, So that might, with the case of Kansas City, it might be a little harder to swallow.
Right. Well, I have a friend who's he's from New Hampshire, so by birth he's a Red Sox, Celtics, Bruins, Patriots guy. And he goes, you have no idea how tough this is for me because I hate Philadelphia, right? And they hate me, right? It's a mutual. But I certainly, as much as I dislike any Eagle, Sixer, Phillies teams, Flyers, as much as I can't stand them, I don't want Kansas City beating any of my Patriot records. So I'm not rooting for either team right now. I hope they both lose, if that's possible. So we'll get over that. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Patrick Steenberg will be our guest next week, and Patrick is with Global Football. He's a former quarterback at the University of Notre Dame, and then afterwards he took his football experience in trying to grow the game and turn it into one where it can be internationally played. He's trying to get the first college game to be played on African soil. He's got a network with the Tanzanian government to be able to have a field and a place to play. He's trying to get that thing together. It's a fascinating story, but it's a way for a man to touch lives all across the world through the game of football. So Patrick will be our guest. He's also an author. He's written a book. So that's why he and Steven will match up quite well together next week. But
didn't you play games in Tarzana when you were a kid, Harper?
No, Tanzania. Not Tarzana, Encino, Woodland Hills, maybe a little Chatsworth
college,
in some little league ball. But I promise you, now my daughter's been to Kenya, and Kenya and Tanzania share a border. So I will learn all kinds of fascinating things about our amazing world and what little part football has in it, but a growing part. So we'll talk about Tarzana and Tanzania, and we'll talk about whether or not Brett Favre and Jim McMahon can stay in the room with some of the greats. We'll continue that conversation. But in the meanwhile, we thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football. We appreciate you being a part of our tomfoolery. We thank you so much for visiting with us today on Take 5 with Steven Travers. We hope you have a fantastic day, everybody.